Hi, everyone. Lisa Haven here, and 70 nations have gathered together with one item on the table, and that is the Israeli-Palestinian peace, or peace between the two countries. Now, we know a lot of things have already played out. We have the resolution that was passed, UN Resolution 2334, which condemned Israel building settlements in certain areas that they deem Palestinian. But nonetheless, a lot of things are playing out. And I put a report out just a couple of weeks ago detailing this meeting of 70 nations and how they wanted to get this done before Donald Trump got into office. And here we are, just 3 days-ish from Donald Trump being inaugurated as our next United States president. Now, with that, I wanted to bring in someone who was actually at this 70-nation meeting. He's got firsthand accounts, firsthand reports, and a great friend of mine. And while we disagree on some things, he's got lots of great intel that I'm so excited to bring to you. So, Stephen Ben-Danoon, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me on, Lisa.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. And I know you've got your own YouTube channel under Stephen Ben-Danoon, as well as a website, IsraeliNewsLive.org.
That's correct.
Okay, good. And I'll leave all of that below. So, Stephen, I know you and I had a conversation prior to this meeting of 70 nations, and we were scraping through the internet, attempting to find out where this was going to be held, because they really kept it silent. They kept it under the radar. We had unanimously decided it's likely UNESCO, which is where it ended up being, thankfully. But can you tell us a little bit about why they're gathered and what's the agenda at this 70 nation meeting?
Absolutely. Actually, UNESCO is where we were thinking it was at, but it wasn't even at UNESCO. What we had found out, like you said, we discovered it was a media blackout. I, of course, reached out to you because I figured if anybody would know, Lisa Haven would know where to find this at. And I'd already talked to different friends in the different parts of the media, Norwegian media, Vanessa Beeley, just a ton of journalists that we know, and everybody was telling me it's a media blackout. And so then we put it online, and one of our friends that listened out of the 2,000 or so that actually looked into it as well, found out it was actually being held at the Rue de la Convention, which was the UN's convention center, that's not very often used for these types of events. And sure enough, that's where it was. We were the first day, because you had mentioned to me already that they're already underway with the convention. And yet it was announced to be on the 15th, but you were exactly right, Lisa. It had already begun. We were there on the 14th, and they were in special session already, having the debates about the UN convention. We were able to catch a lot of the ambassadors that were leaving from China, also from the Middle East, that were debating on the 14th. And then, of course, on the 15th, once we released it to the public where it was being held at, then we've seen pretty much the different journalists that do listen to Israeli News Live showed up as well. And that was kind of a surprise for the police that were there. Nobody was expecting it. And of course, there were no protesters except the pro-Israeli Christian groups that were there earlier that morning at the pro-Israeli rally there in front of the Israeli embassy. So they really got going at it. And what the whole thing is really about, Lisa, is, as you know and I know, Obama and his administration has really been bent, John Kerry pushing this as well, to try to get a two-state solution, or at least force Israel's hand back into doing this two-state solution. And on December the 23rd, Resolution 2334 finally passed. And the sad thing about that is that when it passed for the first time, that the Obama administration abstained and they actually allowed it to go through. It was a disgrace.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that resolution kind of, I think, is what was it? They further endorsed it, I believe, at this United Nations gathering, because the whole agenda, I think, is kind of putting something together between the two, forcing some kind of compliance. So they're not forcing it at this time, but they want to come to that unilateral agreement. Now, I read online, and I'm going to just reference my notes here, that there was, a leaked draft to media outlets that said, about this conference that basically calls on Israel and the Palestinians to disavow any governments who refuse to push the two-state solution. So this was something that came in a media leak memo from the United Nations meeting. Not only that, but reportedly it had three things on the agenda, those being helping the Palestinian economy, strengthening the civil society, and assisting the building of the future Palestinian state. So in a nutshell, I think they want to push the Palestinian country as a whole and, attempt to get that more solidified, so to speak. But I mean, to encourage, no Palestinians or Israelis were at this event, correct?
No, there's a couple of things that I find interesting. I'd like to just step back when you talked about the disavowing any government, because the resolution goes a step further. It's to disavow anyone within your government that does not support a two-state solution. And one thing that people need to keep in mind, basically Resolution 2334 passed in December because the United States did not veto the measure. Neither did Russia, neither did the UK. No one that had the veto powers vetoed the resolution. So in essence, that resolution actually passed. The danger of this, of course, is if all 70 nations pass it as well. And of course, Donald Trump saved the day basically by putting pressure on the UK, and the UK was not willing to sign off on the verbiage of the report. But in essence, the resolution is already passed. It's just the weight is not behind it. Now, when we say that they disavow any member, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because in the case of Rabbi Yehuda Glick, for example, who's a new Knesset member, he is representing those constituents in Judea and Samaria. And by the way, that's who John Kerry was speaking of when he made his report not long ago, that there was a certain parliament member who said there is no more two-state solution, which he did misquote him. Brother Begley said he is either quoting you, Steve, or from our channel. I don't know which one, because we both carried what John Kerry said. And but anyway, him or Danny Danon, who is actually the ambassador to the United Nations for Israel, he's for one state. And in reality, it should be one state. And I'm not against the Palestinian people, by no means either. People would be surprised, Lisa, to know how many, especially Palestinian women, do not want a Palestinian state, because that means going to Sharia law. And they do not want that. They want the liberal way of the Israeli lifestyle that Israel has to offer under the democracy that they have. And they will not have it under a Palestinian state. So from what we have gathered, about 80% of Palestinian women do not want a Palestinian state. And
let me just add this. You know this because you're directly living in the area, correct?
Well, we're in and out of there. Our main base is in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Prague, but I've lived there for a long time as well. And I'm there constantly because I'm only just a few hours away from Israel. But we have also recently Yana interviewed some of the Israeli women there, and was doing exactly that, trying to find out what the feel is for a Palestinian state based on the Palestinians as well as based on the Israelis' view. And I know it from my own personal experience that Palestinian people, it's a very small minority that are violent. That do cause the unrest that we have. Not saying that the Israeli government, that we don't have flaws, that we don't make mistakes. I'm not for acquisition land, things of that nature there. We don't need to do that. We can live in peace. My problem is why has the UN, formerly the League of Nations, made promises for a Jewish homeland only to break promise after promise after promise. So what difference is Resolution 2334? Not to mention biblically the right that Israel has, as far as, not saying that we should just go in and take this land, but people seem to forget when the resolution in 1920 and in 1922. In 1920, we were given all of everything to the west of the Jordan River and east, what is known as the modern-day state of Jordan. And in 1922, 2 years later, Britain reneged on the promise that was made through the League of Nations, and they give away 71% of the land to Hussein, who is to Abdullah, the son of Hussein, for helping fighting in World War I. 1947, again, they want to divide the land. That was after 6 years that the Jewish people went through a Holocaust and were not allowed to come to the land that was promised to them, because of 1922, everything of the west of the Jordan River was for the Jewish homeland and for nobody else. And then they smuggled in illegally Egyptians and then now Jordanians into the country, trying to populate it while they banned Jewish immigration during the war so the Jews could die off. So how can then, as Jewish people, and I was offered my own Israeli citizenship by the Knesset recently as well, so how can we take and say that we can trust the United Nations with any resolution they have to offer, because we know they wouldn't keep it in the first place?
That's the thing. I mean, there's many, quote, deals that have been shook hands. You know, we have the Oslo Accords. We have, you know, so many, and just failure after failure after failure. But I think what you fail to hear on the mainstream media is what you just said a moment ago about, you know, a lot of the Palestinian women there, they don't want, you know, the rules that Palestinians get involved, because yes, Sharia law is a part of that. You know, Sharia law, the one that is okay with, killing women, you know, for doing certain things, or, you know, this isn't okay with me. And if we really are about the rights of women here in America, then why push it? And I think that's a question to be addressed. I mean, if we're going to save lives here, not to mention, I mean, I'm just saying, but their views on homosexuality, they're all for killing them. And America is, you know, so it's just one of those things. Now, I know Donald Trump has even pondered the idea. Whether or not he'll follow through with it is another question, but moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, I know that he's brought that up. It's obviously brought a lot of tension to the United Nations. They don't like that at all. But that would basically solidify or ensure the Israeli capital, I guess, from the U.S. standpoint. But those are some things to think about. And look, God loves both. We love both. Palestinians, Israel's, Jews, Muslims, Christian. God loves them all. And, you know, he wants all of us to come to the saving knowledge of him. And I think that's what, you know, we need to remember, bottom line. But with that, you know, I think there's a lot of significant events with this 70 nation gathering, because we know that they could broker some kind of deal. I talked about this earlier. It's definitely something that's on the table. Now, obviously, the event is done. They could put it down the road, but with Trump in, I think there's a lot less of a likelihood of something like that happening, but I guess time will tell. But nonetheless, the fact that 70 gathered, can you tell us just a little bit about why that's important, the number 70, and what that means?
It's very significant. And one of the main reasons it's significant is the fact that when Moses, when he actually appointed the elders over Israel, he appointed 70 elders. And some people may not realize, put the connection together. But if you begin to really look at things, for example, the United Nations is basically a Judeo-Christian type of organization. Some people might not like that idea very well, because you have Arabic nations, everybody that represents it, but still it was still chartered and put together a lot with the Vatican in behind the scenes, and because of this here, we see the influence, just like the structure of, for example, of the Catholic Church. They try to follow very much the pattern of what Israel was in ancient times, and in certain aspects. So when we see the 70 nations that came together, which is actually, I think, 75 nations were represented there, but it was titled the 70 nations that were coming together. But what's important about that is that they're trying to mimic a biblical aspect here of, like, these are the elders of all the nations coming together to judge Israel. You also have that Israel was 70 years in Babylon is another thing that comes to mind. You have the 70 weeks of Daniel. Now, these are just types here. It doesn't mean that necessarily it plays out biblically on that. We have prophecies clearly being fulfilled in regards to this particular event. At least in my own mind, I believe it is setting the stage for things that are going to happen in the very near future. And of course, pushing Israel out of Jerusalem is one of those events that's about to happen, Lisa.
Yeah, a lot of things are on the table, and I find it interesting. Even, I know 70 was one that represents the nations of the world, biblically speaking. When you look into the numbers, and that's what happened. 70 nations of the world, though it wasn't all of them, gathered to put on the table whether or not they want to once again divide the land of Israel and support that. And that's what they're doing. They supported the resolution. They backboned off the resolution. However, nothing was done, sealed, cut, and dried as in response to that. But nonetheless, they know Donald Trump's coming in. They're a little nerve-wracked about that because he does support Israel, at least vocally. So we'll see where that stands. You guys over there in Israel, at least they have somewhat, a country like ours in the middle of just a bunch of chaos that's breaking out on a daily basis. Well, I just want to say, thank you for coming on the channel. So do you have any final thoughts, comments, concerns, and then also share your website information or any information like that too?
Thank you. Yes. I do appreciate the fact that Donald Trump has stood with Israel. And like you said, verbally, he's definitely doing it. And it seems like from the outset, he's been trying to stand with Israel. And that's very commendable for him. I've also felt like that his stand with not throwing Vladimir Putin under the bus there, that might calm the situation here in Eastern Europe down that we're seeing on a daily basis, just tanks and troops, everything going to the border, has been another appreciation that I have for him. And in light of looking at and just summarizing this, what we're seeing right now, I do believe we're seeing Psalm 83. I do believe that the United Nations, this is a conspiracy, and they have come together to conspire against Israel, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. That's really the ultimate goal of the 70 nations. I think of Yeshua appointing 70 apostles to the nations. Again, there were 70 nations there that he appointed that went out to all the world. So we see that as well. But one of the most critical things is concerning me is that I think we're on the verge of seeing Micah 4 really being fulfilled, where it prophesies that Israel will return to their homeland, verse 6, and they would be in Mount Zion forevermore. But then the odd thing, Lisa, is that suddenly something changes in verse 9. Israel is now in travail. And even God says, should I allow her to come to this and not be delivered? So Israel is about to go through a travailing time. And the prophecy, when you get down to verse 9 and below, shows that Israel is going to be driven out of Jerusalem. Not out of Israel, but out of Jerusalem. And this is exactly what the Oslo Accords were all about. Shimon Peres in 1993 was working with the Vatican. It was leaked out by Barry Chamish, which was late Barry Chamish, good friend of mine, Joel Bainerman, these great investigative journalists that died, especially Joel Bainerman, mysteriously. And they did not want that information to get out to the world. But Shimon Peres promised the Vatican that they would get Jerusalem. And that's part of the Resolution 181, 1947, that Jerusalem would be controlled by a foreign entity, but never specifies who. I think we're coming down to the end, Lisa, and we're about to see biblical prophecy fulfill in ways maybe we never even thought would actually happen. So I think that's where we're at now. And as far as our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org is how people can also be able to view things. And of course, the YouTube channel, Stephen Ben-Danoon or Israeli News Live on YouTube, both names are assigned to the same channel.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks again for coming on. And I agree, there are some biblical events playing out that we need to keep our eyes on, especially for all the Christian listeners out there, because some interesting things are, playing out. We see the New World Order rising. We see things lining up with Israel, and God's, ticking his little time clock there, and we'll see what happens. Well, thanks again for coming on the channel, Stephen, and thank you guys for tuning in to Lisa Haven News. This is Lisa and Stephen Ben-Danoon signing out.